Hello everyone, and thanks for tuning in. If you enjoy stories about finding strength after betrayal, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more content. Today's story is about a woman named Alara, who learned that even the most casual words can be twisted into a weapon by someone determined to leave. Alara had always believed their foundation was unshakable. 38, a successful architect in a Seattle firm that valued her clean lines and uncompromising vision, she thought the life she had built with her wife, Lena, was their shared masterpiece. They had 12 years, a restored craftsman in Ballard with a garden Lena fussed over, and a rhythm so comfortable it felt like breathing. They had a life of shared jokes, Saturday mornings at the farmer's market, and the quiet understanding that passed between two people who knew each other's history. Until that Tuesday afternoon in November, when a single, ill-chosen sentence about the past was used to justify a betrayal that had been growing in the dark for months, a meticulously planned demolition of everything Alara held true. She had thought their love was a structure built to last a lifetime. She was about to discover it was a facade, and the wrecking ball was already swinging. The first signs were so subtle, Alara had mistaken them for the normal static of a long-term relationship. Lena, a charismatic project manager at a rival tech firm, had always been the more socially fluid of the two, but recently her energy had shifted. She was less present, her attention fractured, her phone always angled slightly away. She started using new words, phrases plucked from self-help podcasts and therapy blogs. She spoke of holding space for her own needs, of the importance of radical authenticity, and, most unnervingly, of re-examining traditional relationship structures Alara, ever the pragmatist, had tried to engage. "What structures are we talking about?" she'd asked one evening over dinner, pushing pasta around her plate. Lena had given a vague, airy wave of her hand. "Oh, you know. Monogamy, codependency. The idea that one person has to be your everything. It's just limiting, don't you think? Society imposes these scripts on us." Alara had felt a cold not form in her stomach, but had pushed it down, attributing it to Lena's work stress. Her wife's latest project was a massive, high-pressure launch, and she was working long hours, often with her star programmer, a woman named Chloe whom Lena described as brilliantly intense. The late nights, the weekend work sessions, the constant texting. Alara had catalogued it all under the heading of professional dedication. She had prided herself on being a supportive partner, on understanding the demands of a high-powered career. She made sure dinner was ready, that the house was a calm sanctuary for Lena to return to, that she never added to the pressure. She had believed she was supporting her wife's ambition. She hadn't realized she was merely maintaining the home base for an entirely different operation. The emotional distance grew, a silent chasm widening between their sides of the bed. Lena's touch became perfunctory, her kisses brief and dry. When Alara tried to initiate intimacy, Lena would sigh, plead exhaustion, or talk about feeling disconnected from her body. It was all part of the new vocabulary. A shield of therapeutic jargon that made Alara feel boorish and insensitive for simply wanting to hold her wife. The growing unease was a low hum beneath the surface of their daily lives, a foundation crack she kept plastering over with rationalizations. "It's the project. It's stress. We're just in a slump. Every marriage has them." She had believed these things because the alternative was unthinkable. The alternative was that the woman she had loved for more than a decade, the woman whose laughter was the soundtrack to her happiest memories, was methodically and quietly erasing her from the picture. The breaking point arrived not with a bang, but with a quiet, reflective conversation that Alara would replay in her mind for months, dissecting every word. It was a Sunday evening, the sky outside a bruised purple as a classic Seattle drizzle slicked the windows. They were sharing a bottle of wine, a rare moment of seeming tranquility. They were reminiscing about past relationships, a casual, harmless topic they had explored before. Alara, feeling a bit maudlin from the wine, was talking about a girlfriend from her 20s, a whirlwind romance that had burned out as quickly as it started. She was a mess in so many ways, Alara mused, swirling the Pinot Noir in her glass. Completely unreliable, emotionally chaotic. But God, she had this. confidence. This absolute, unapologetic belief that she was entitled to take up space in the world. I'd forgotten what that felt like. She had meant it as a throwaway observation, a comment on a personality trait, not a person. She wasn't expressing a longing for her ex, merely a fleeting admiration for a specific quality she herself sometimes lacked. She looked over at Lena, expecting a nod of understanding or a shared anecdote. Instead, Lena's face was a mask of cold stillness. Her eyes, normally warm and expressive, were flat and hard. "So you miss her," Lena stated. It wasn't a question. "No, of course not," Alara said quickly, unsettled by the sudden chill. "I don't miss her at all. I just meant the confidence." It was just an observation. Lena didn't respond. She just stared into her glass, a muscle twitching in her jaw. The comfortable atmosphere in the room evaporated, replaced by something tense and accusatory. Lena stood up, her movements stiff. "I'm tired," she announced, her voice devoid of emotion. "I'm going to bed." She left the room without another word, leaving Alara alone with the dregs of her wine and a profound sense of dread. Alara sat there for a long time, the rain tapping against the glass, trying to understand what had just happened. She had offered a small, vulnerable piece of her past, and Lena had treated it like an act of aggression. She replayed her words again. "I said I missed my ex's confidence." It seemed so insignificant, so benign. She eventually chalked it up to Lena's exhaustion and the ever-present project stress, another crack to be smoothed over. She cleaned up the kitchen, locked the doors, and went to bed, slipping in beside a wife who was already turned away from her, a rigid, unbreachable wall of silence in the dark. She had no idea that her casual, nostalgic remark had just been logged as Exhibit A, the final, convenient piece of proof Lena needed to justify the demolition she had already set in motion. The next day, Alara worked from home. Lena had left early. A brief "have a good day" called from the front hall, her only communication. The house felt unnervingly quiet. Around 2 p.m., the doorbell rang. Alara, expecting a package, opened it to find a nondescript man in a cheap suit holding a large manila envelope. "Alara Vance?" he asked, his tone bored. "Yes. You've been served." He handed her the envelope and walked away without another glance. Alara stood in the doorway, the cool November air raising goosebumps on her arms. The weight of the envelope felt obscene in her hands. Her mind refused to process the words. Served? Served with what? A lawsuit from a disgruntled client? A neighborhood dispute over a property line? She closed the door, her heart beginning to hammer against her ribs with a frantic, sickening rhythm. She walked to the kitchen island and tore open the seal, her fingers trembling. The first page was a petition for dissolution of marriage. The petitioner was Lena Rowe. The respondent was Alara Vance. Her vision blurred. The crisp, legalistic text swam before her eyes. Irreconcilable differences. Division of assets. Spousal support. The words were clinical, brutal, and utterly alien. This wasn't happening. It was a mistake, a grotesque, impossible error. But there it was, filed with the King County Superior Court that very morning. Lena had filed for divorce. Without a word. Without a fight. Without even the decency of a conversation. A wave of nausea washed over her, so intense she had to grip the edge of the granite countertop to keep from falling. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. She stared at the date on the filing. Lena must have gone to the courthouse this morning, before work. After their conversation last night. The coldness of it, the sheer, calculated cruelty, was breathtaking. Lena hadn't just decided to leave. She had planned it. She had hired a lawyer, prepared the paperwork, and waited. Waited for what? For the right moment? For an excuse? And then, Alara's mind flashed back to the previous night. Lena's flat eyes. Her cold, clipped tone. "So you miss her." That was it. That was the pretext. The flimsy, manufactured justification she needed to pull the trigger on a plan that was already in place. The casual comment about an ex's confidence hadn't caused this. It had simply been the cue. The realization hit her not like a wave, but like a core sample being drilled through her entire being, revealing layers of deception she had been too trusting to see. The late nights, the therapy speak, the emotional distance, it wasn't a slump. It was a strategy. It was an exit plan. The shock held her paralyzed for what felt like hours. She sat on a kitchen stool, the divorce papers spread out before her like an autopsy report of her 12-year marriage. The clinical language detailed the life they had built, reducing it to assets and liabilities. The house in Ballard, the joint savings account, the investment portfolio. Lena's petition was thorough, almost surgically precise. It requested that Alara vacate the primary residence within 30 days and proposed a division of assets that, even to Alara's untrained eye, seemed disproportionately in Lena's favor. The sheer audacity of it burned through the fog of disbelief, replaced by a slow-burning, icy rage. This wasn't the impulsive act of a stressed, unhappy woman. This was a coup. While Alara had been trying to mend the cracks, Lena had been lining up her lawyers and drawing new blueprints for a life without her. That night, fueled by a potent cocktail of grief and fury, Alara did what she did best. She looked for the structural flaws. She opened their shared laptop, a device they hadn't password protected because trust had been their operating system. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, a cold dread coiling in her gut. She started with the place she knew Lena managed their life, the cloud drive. In a folder mislabeled Project Phoenix, Personal, she found it. It wasn't just a plan, it was a manifesto. There were spreadsheets detailing their finances, with columns highlighting assets Lena had designated as hers. There were saved links to articles about starting over after 40 and how to leave a long-term relationship with minimal conflict. Minimal conflict. The irony was a physical blow. But the most damning evidence was in a password-protected document titled Journal. The password was pathetically simple: Chloe's birthday, a date Alara remembered from a calendar reminder Lena had set months ago. Inside was a log of her affair. Months and months of it. Detailed entries described secret lunches, weekend trips disguised as work conferences, and intimate moments with Chloe. Lena wrote about feeling truly seen for the first time, about the stifling comfort of her life with Alara, and about Chloe's vibrant energy compared to Alara's predictable stability. The narrative was one of a woman convincing herself she was the victim, trapped in a passionless marriage with a partner who didn't understand her. And there, in an entry from 2 weeks ago, was the kill shot. Lena wrote about her lawyer's advice to establish a clear, precipitating event for the divorce filing. He said it helps the narrative. Lena had written something to show I tried, but that there was a final straw. A clear sign the marriage was unsalvageable. I just need to wait for the right moment. Alara felt the air leave her lungs. The conversation about her ex. It wasn't just a pretext, it was a manufactured, legally advised trigger. She was a character in a script Lena had written to facilitate a clean, guilt-free exit. Alara methodically began to download everything. The journal entries, the spreadsheets, the synced text messages between Lena and Chloe filled with saccharine pet names and disparaging comments about Alara's cluelessness. She found the receipts for hotel rooms in Portland and Vancouver, paid for from a credit card Alara didn't know existed. The evidence was overwhelming, a digital monument to a year of breathtaking deception. By the time Lena's car pulled into the driveway, Alara had printed everything. A thick stack of paper sat on the dining room table, a silent testament to the truth. She was no longer grieving. She was an architect who had just discovered her life's work was built on a sinkhole, and now she was going to handle the demolition herself. Lena walked in, humming softly, a bag of groceries in her arms. She stopped short when she saw Alara sitting at the dining room table, the overhead light casting a harsh glare on the stack of papers in front of her. The divorce petition was on top. "Oh," Lena said, her voice small. She set the groceries on the counter, her manufactured confidence beginning to fray. "You got those?" "I did," Alara said, her own voice terrifyingly calm. It was quite a surprise. "But then I did a little reading. It seems you've been planning a lot of surprises lately." She gestured to the pile of printouts. Lena's eyes widened as she recognized the format of her own text messages, the familiar layout of her secret spreadsheets. The color drained from her face. "Alara, I can explain," she began, the first line of the Cheater's Handbook. Can you? Alara asked, her tone glacial. Can you explain Project Phoenix? Or the secret credit card? Or the weekend conference in Portland that seems to have involved a king-size bed at the 9s and 0 work-related emails? Please, Lena. Explain, Lena stammered, her carefully constructed narrative crumbling under the weight of hard evidence. It's not what you think. Chloe and I, we just connected. It was an escape. I was feeling so trapped, so. Unseen here, unseen. Alara's laugh was a sharp, brittle sound. You were seen, Lena. You were seen every single day for 12 years. I saw you when you had the flu and I held your hair back. I saw you when your father died and I held you for 3 days straight. I saw you when you were promoted and I threw you a party with everyone you loved. Don't you dare stand there in the beautiful home I designed for us and tell me you were unseen. The blame shifting came next, as predicted. Well, what was I supposed to do? Lena's voice rose, laced with a desperate, self-serving indignation. You pushed me away. You're always so wrapped up in your work, so contained. And then last night, you admitted you missed your ex. What was I supposed to think? It was the moment Alara had been waiting for. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto Lena's. That line was for your lawyer, wasn't it? Your precipitating event, the final straw you were waiting for to make yourself look like the victim. I read your journal, Lena. I read about the legal advice. The last bit of Lena's composure shattered. Her face crumpled. Alara, no, it wasn't like that. I love you, I do. I just got lost. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. Chloe meant nothing. She meant enough for you to open a secret bank account, Alara countered, her voice dropping to a near whisper. She meant enough for you to write, and I quote, leaving Alara is the first step to my real life, so don't tell me she meant nothing. You meant nothing. Your vows meant nothing. Alara stood up, walking around the table until she was standing directly in front of her wife. You served me divorce papers this morning. You made your choice. The only thing that's going to change now is the terms of our separation. Your petition is a work of fiction. This, she said, tapping the thick stack of evidence, is the truth. And my lawyer will be receiving a copy tomorrow morning. The marriage is over, Lena. You ended it. But I'll be the one to define how Lena finally broke, sinking into a chair and burying her face in her hands, her sobs raw and pathetic. But Alara felt nothing. No pity, no lingering affection. Only the cold, clean certainty of a foundation being leveled to the ground so that something new, something honest, could be built in its place. She turned and walked out of the room, leaving Lena to weep amidst the ruins she had so carefully and so stupidly created. Thank you for listening to this story. We hope you found Alara's journey compelling. If you want to hear more stories about strength, resilience, and getting the justice you deserve, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update.